I raised my stepson like he was my own son for almost 40 years. But after my wife passed away, he tricked me into putting the house in his name. Then he kicked me out and sold it. I ended up homeless, living in my truck. But I had one final card to play, and by the time he found out, it was already too late. Let me start from the beginning, because the ending won't make sense unless you understand how it all began, and the events that led to how my own stepson betrayed me. My name is Donemar Vexton, and I am 78 years old. I spent most of my working life as an engineer in Kilbridge, a quiet town in the Midwest where neighbors still wave and everyone knows your business. For nearly 4 decades, I shared my modest home with my beloved wife Alvinia and her son Neryl, who became the child I never had. I raised that boy from the time he was small. When his real father walked out and never looked back, I stepped in without hesitation. I paid for his schooling, cleared his debts when his businesses failed, and even walked him down the aisle when he got married. Every scraped knee, every homework assignment, every proud moment and heartbreak, I was there. Neryl was not just my stepson. He was my son in every way that mattered. When Alvinia passed away 6 months ago, I thought Neryl and I would grieve together. We had both lost the woman who held our little family together. I expected we would support each other through the hardest time of our lives. Looking back, I should have seen the signs. I should have noticed how quickly his visit stopped after the funeral. I should have questioned why he suddenly seemed so interested in my financial situation and kept asking about the house paperwork. But grief makes you vulnerable. Grief makes you trust when you should be careful. 3 weeks after we buried Alvinia, Neryl showed up at my door with papers and a concerned expression. He explained that there were tax issues with the house, complicated legal matters that I wouldn't understand. He said the best thing would be to transfer ownership to him temporarily, just to protect the property and make everything easier. I was confused and overwhelmed. The man I had raised was speaking in legal terms I didn't grasp, but his tone was gentle and caring. He assured me nothing would change. I would still live in my home, still have my memories of Alvinia in every room. This was just paperwork, he said, just a formality to keep the government from causing problems. I signed those papers because I trusted him completely. I didn't know it then, but I had just signed away everything I had left in this world. For 3 weeks, life continued as normal. I tended to Alvinia's garden, sat in her favorite chair on the porch, and tried to figure out how to live without her. The house still smelled like her perfume. Her coffee cup still sat in the kitchen sink because I couldn't bring myself to wash it. Then came that afternoon that changed everything. I had gone to the hardware store to buy some supplies for fixing the back porch railing. Alvinia had been asking me to repair it for over a year before she passed, and somehow finishing that project felt like keeping a promise to her. When I pulled into my driveway, I noticed something was different. The front door looked strange. It took me a moment to realize why. The locks had been changed. I walked up to my own front door and tried my key. It wouldn't turn. I tried again, thinking maybe I was using the wrong key, but nothing worked. My heart began beating faster as I walked around the house, checking every door and window. That was when I saw the paper taped to the front door. An eviction notice. My hands shook as I read the official language that I barely understood. The house had been sold. The new owners wanted me out immediately. I had 30 days to remove my belongings. At that moment, I realized what had happened. The boy I had raised, the son I had loved and sacrificed for, had sold my home and kept every single dollar. I stood on that porch for what felt like hours, reading and rereading those legal documents. The words blurred together through my tears, but the message was crystal clear. The house where I had lived for decades, where I had raised Neryl, where Alvinia and I had built our life together, no longer belonged to me. The neighbors started to notice me standing there. Mrs. Henderson from next door came over and asked if everything was all right. I tried to explain what had happened, but the words caught in my throat. How do you tell someone that your own son has thrown you out of your home? How do you admit that the person you trusted most in the world has betrayed you so completely? I didn't know it then, but this was just the beginning of my nightmare. That first night, I slept in my old pickup truck, parked behind Murphy's mechanic shop. The same truck I had used to drive Neryl to school every morning for years. The same truck where I had taught him how to drive when he turned 16. Now it was my bedroom, my shelter, my only protection from the world. The back seat was cramped and cold. My 78-year-old bones ached against the worn fabric. I wrapped myself in an old army blanket that I kept in the truck for emergencies, never imagining that one day I would need it to survive. I couldn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Neril as a little boy, crying because his real father had promised to take him fishing and never showed up. I remembered holding him, promising that I would always be there for him. I remembered telling him that family means never giving up on each other. Looking back, I should have called him that night. I should have demanded an explanation. But part of me still couldn't believe what had happened. Part of me kept thinking there had to be some mistake, some misunderstanding that we could fix. The next morning, I drove to Neril's office downtown. I had helped him start that business, had co-signed the loan when the bank wouldn't approve him on his own. I walked into the reception area, and his secretary seemed surprised to see me. She buzzed his office and spoke in hushed tones before telling me to have a seat. 20 minutes later, Neril finally came out. He looked uncomfortable, avoiding my eyes as he approached. When I asked him about the house, about what had happened, his explanation was cold and businesslike. He said he had found a good opportunity and decided to sell. He claimed he had tried to call me but couldn't reach me. That was a lie. My phone had been working perfectly. I asked him where he expected me to live. He shrugged and suggested I look into senior housing or maybe move in with some relatives. The casual way he said it, like my homelessness was just a minor inconvenience, hit me harder than any physical blow could have. This was not the boy I had raised. This was not the young man who used to call me dad and ask for my advice on everything from career decisions to relationship problems. This was a stranger wearing the face of my son. I didn't know it then, but I was about to discover that my situation was far worse than I imagined. Over the next few days, I learned the full extent of what Neril had done. He had not just sold the house, he had cleaned out the joint bank account that Alvinia and I had shared. He had taken my tools, my furniture, even the photo albums filled with pictures of our family. Everything that connected me to my life with Alvinia was gone. I was not just homeless, I was erased. For 3 weeks, I lived in that truck. I washed up in gas station bathrooms and bought cheap food with the little money I had left. I parked in different places each night, trying to avoid attracting attention from police or security guards who might move me along. The worst part was not the physical discomfort. The worst part was the shame. I had spent my entire life working hard, paying my bills, being a responsible member of my community. Now I was just another homeless old man that people looked at with pity or disgust. But fate had other plans for me. Plans that would turn my quiet suffering into something much bigger than I ever imagined possible. 3 weeks into living in my truck, I found myself at Rosie's Diner just outside Kilbridge. It was one of those small-town places where the coffee was strong and the waitresses called everyone honey. I had gone there to charge my phone and nurse a cup of coffee for as long as they would let me sit. That was where I met Cyril Janko. I almost didn't recognize him at first. The last time I had seen Cyril, he was a young intern at my engineering firm, eager to learn and full of questions about every project we worked on. Now he was in his 30s, well-dressed and carrying expensive camera equipment. He recognized me before I recognized him. The look of shock on his face when he saw my unshaven appearance and worn-out clothes was something I will never forget. For a moment, we both just stared at each other, trying to bridge the gap between who I used to be and who I had become. Cyril approached my table with concern written all over his face. He asked if I was okay, but even as he asked the question, we both knew the answer. Nobody who was okay would look the way I looked or be sitting alone in a diner at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday. I didn't want to burden him with my problems. This young man had his own life to worry about, but something about his genuine concern broke down the walls I had built around my shame. Before I knew it, I was telling him everything. I told him about Alvinia's death, about the papers Neril had convinced me to sign, about waking up to find myself locked out of my own home. I told him about sleeping in my truck and washing up in gas station bathrooms. I told him about the son I had raised who had thrown me away like garbage. As I spoke, I watched Cyril's expression change from concern to anger to something that looked like determination. When I finished my story, he sat quietly for a long moment, processing everything I had shared. Then he asked me something that would change everything. He explained that he now worked as a content creator, making videos for a YouTube channel that focused on real-life stories and social issues. He had a few thousand subscribers who followed his work, people who cared about justice and helping others. He wanted to know if I would let him record my story. I didn't know it then, but this conversation would set in motion events that would spiral far beyond anything either of us could have imagined. At first, I hesitated. The idea of sharing my private pain with strangers on the internet felt overwhelming. I had always been a private person, someone who handled problems quietly and without drama. But Cyril explained that my story could help other elderly people who might be facing similar situations. He said that sometimes the only way to fight injustice was to shine a light on it. I agreed to let him record the interview. We spent the next 2 hours in that diner booth, with Cyril's camera capturing every word as I told the complete story of my betrayal. He asked thoughtful questions that helped me explain not just what had happened, but how it felt to be discarded by someone you loved. He helped me put into words the pain that I had been carrying alone for weeks. Looking back, I should have asked more questions about what would happen to that recording. I should have thought more carefully about the consequences of putting my story out into the world. But grief and desperation make you willing to try things you would never normally consider. Cyril titled the video something that would grab attention while telling the truth about my situation. He uploaded it to his YouTube channel the next morning, along with information about how people could help if they wanted to support an elderly man who had been wronged by his own family. I didn't expect much to happen. I thought maybe a few dozen people would watch the video and feel sorry for an old man's troubles. I had no idea that within 48 hours, my personal tragedy would explode across the internet and change my life in ways I never could have predicted. Within 2 days, that video had been viewed over 2 million times. The comment section exploded with outrage from people all over the world who were shocked by what Neril had done to me. Hashtags like Justice for Donemar and Elder Abuse Awareness spread across social media platforms faster than I could have imagined possible. Donations flooded a GoFundMe page dedicated just for me. But the attention brought more than just sympathy and financial help. It brought help in ways I never expected. A lawyer named Navora Quell contacted Cyril after watching the video. She specialized in elder abuse cases and offered to represent me for free. What I didn't know at the time was that Navora had her own painful history with this kind of betrayal. Her father had been tricked by a caregiver who stole his property, and he died before justice could be served. Navora filed legal papers to challenge the house transfer, using elder abuse laws and the evidence that had come to light through the viral video. Donations poured into a fundraising page that Cyril had created. News outlets picked up the story. Advocacy groups for elderly rights rallied behind my case. For the first time in months, I felt hope. But success brought complications I hadn't anticipated. Navora's personal trauma began to cloud her judgment. She pushed for maximum legal penalties against Neril, including jail time and complete financial ruin. When I tried to explain that I just wanted my house back, not to destroy the boy I had raised, she became angry with me. Meanwhile, Cyril started treating my tragedy like entertainment. He released follow-up videos without asking my permission, sharing private details and even leaked recordings to keep his audience engaged. When I confronted him about this, he apologized but continued using my story to build his channel's popularity. Now, before we proceed, it's very important to say that if you're enjoying this story, please take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel. By liking, subscribing, and even leaving a short comment of where you are watching from, you are helping me grow this channel so that other people can find this video and learn the graceful wisdom tips that it offers. I share real stories from people who face tough situations just like this. These stories aren't just for entertainment, they're meant to help us learn and grow wiser. We can sometimes become vulnerable, and that's why it's so important to learn from the experiences and mistakes of others. Together we can protect ourselves and protect each other through shared wisdom. Now, back to our story. The pressure on Neril became overwhelming. His business suffered as customers learned about the case. Reporters showed up at his office with cameras. His wife left him, taking their children. The man who had betrayed me was falling apart publicly. Then came the night that changed everything again. Neril appeared at my motel room door, looking broken and desperate. He fell to his knees and begged for my forgiveness, promising to return the house immediately. Through tears, he confessed that he had stolen from me because he felt forgotten after his mother died. He claimed he wanted something to prove he mattered, something to call his own. I looked down at this man I had raised, seeing both the cruel betrayer and the scared little boy I had once comforted. Despite everything he had done, I still felt love for him. I remembered the promise I had made to Alvinia on her deathbed to protect him and keep him on the right path. But the machine we had set in motion could not be stopped. Cyril secretly recorded Neryl's confession and released it online without my consent. The leaked audio made Neryl look manipulative and fake, even though his apology had seemed genuine to me. Navora refused to drop the legal case, determined to see Neryl punished to the full extent of the law. More evidence surfaced during the investigation. Bank transfers, forged documents, even recorded conversations with the realtor. Neryl's crimes were more extensive than anyone had realized. When the case went to court, he broke down completely and pleaded guilty to fraud and elder abuse. I got my house back through the fundraising money, but it felt hollow. The real estate company sold it to me at cost to avoid bad publicity. I returned to the same rooms, the same furniture, the same memories of life with Alvinia. But nothing was the same. Norel was sentenced to prison. Navora moved on to other cases. Cyril moved on with his content creation profession and found new stories to exploit. The internet forgot about my tragedy and moved on to the next viral sensation. I had won everything I thought I wanted. I had my house, my justice, my vindication. The whole world had seen that I was the victim and Neryl was the villain. But as I sat in Alvinia's chair each evening, watching the sunset through the same window where we used to hold hands, I wondered if anyone had really won it all. I had kept my promise to protect Neryl by raising him with love, but in seeking justice for his betrayal, I had become the instrument of his destruction. To this day, I don't know if I made the right choice. My story teaches us several important lessons. 1. Understand before you sign. Never sign legal documents without fully understanding them, especially when you're grieving. Always get independent legal advice before transferring property or assets. 2. Guard financial trust. Be cautious about who you trust with your financial information, even family members. Now, there are 2 important things I need you to help me do. The first important thing is, if you enjoyed this story, there's another one you really shouldn't miss. It's about a wealthy, elderly man whose 3 children secretly tried to kill him. The children believed that their father was too old, so they locked him up in a hidden room at their family mansion and hoped he would die of starvation. The plan of the 3 children was to quickly share his $50 million assets for their inheritance. But by the time the 3 children found out what their father had done with his will, it was already too late for them. If you are interested in seeing this story, you will see a video appearing at the top right corner of your screen shortly after I mention the second most important thing that I need you to help me do. The second important thing is, I would love you to like this current video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments about the story we just finished. And even if you don't want to share your thoughts, just let me know where you're watching from. I'd love to see how far my videos are reaching. Now, without wasting your time, hurry and click the video at the top right corner of your screen, because it won't be there for long. Trust me, you don't want to miss the story about the wealthy elderly man and his 3 children who tried to kill him and forcefully take their inheritance. See you in the next video, and until next time, keep living with grace and purpose.